Thank you guys so much for having me here. Can everyone hear me okay? Can everyone see my slides all right? Is anyone already annoyed I asked those questions? In the back, we have at least one vote. Well, I know it's a kind of cliche thing, but I think I have to say it because it's true. I am the last speaker of the evening, and there's been a reception announced where I heard that there was drinks for all. So I can understand there's this person up here just eyeing me. Hurry up, dude. Finish up. But what we're going to talk about today is something I think is kind of important. I just want to say thank you so much, AppSec Cali, for inviting me out. Your mission is truly inspiring to me. And I will talk more about how it's so very important that each of you in this room listen up, even if you don't work in healthcare. And I'm going to convince you by the end of this talk that you probably do and you don't even know. And my name is Christian Demeth. I'm an emergency medicine doctor by training. What does that mean? It means if you see me at work, you're having a very bad day. Do you know what it's like to go to work every day and the people that come and work with you don't want to be there or see you at all, just every day? It's kind of a bummer. But I really love what I do. It's an amazing thing. Sometimes you see me working in the trauma bay, sometimes in the critical care area of the emergency department, taking care of really sick patients. Sometimes it's broken bones. Sometimes it's just simple stitches, old person with pneumonia. It's just kind of my day-to-day. I'm new out of training, so I'm still kind of fresh at it. But I'm one of those full-fledged doctors instead of one of those little baby ones running around. So I am currently a UC San Diego clinical informatics fellow. Long story short, I don't even know what that means, actually. I do health IT, and my passion's really security. We're going to talk a lot about that. This is Jacobs Medical Center outside of La Jolla. The reason I put that up on my slides is just to show you that healthcare is very proud of being connected, of having everything plugged into the internet and the medical Internet of Things that we're going to talk about today. We advertise being one of the most connected hospitals in the United States. Perhaps it's not something we should be so proud of, although we do great work. But before I was a doctor, I was a hacker. Much like everyone else in this room, I explored, hacked, broke a bunch of systems growing up. It was a passion that was instilled on me at a very early age. I've been involved a lot in the hacker community and have been fortunate enough to kind of, with a foot in each world, identify problems that aren't blaringly obvious from the security community and the woefully ignorant medical IT community about patient safety concerns. A couple things, I did some human augmentation stuff at DEF CON, and then at DEF CON 22 we had a Hacking 911 infrastructure talk. And then I do the Do No Harm event at DEF CON. That's now becoming an annual thing. So if you make it out to the summer cons, please hit us up. We're a medical infrastructure, medical device, security focused meetup, if you will. All right, I'm going to start my presentation off today by talking to you about my favorite painting. Now, that makes me sound sophisticated. Truly, that's the only painting I know the name of. Okay? So it's called The Doctor, and the reason I like it so much is just to set the stage and talk about what I see in this painting. I see the patient-doctor relationship in its most purest form. We see a young, sick child in the middle of the painting, clearly not doing so well. We see a wise old doctor peering over that patient with both concern and contemplation, wondering what the best course of action would be to treat this patient. And we see in the background, perhaps an older brother, perhaps a father of that patient that's worried, concerned what's going to happen to this child. That trust, that relationship, it's perfectly embodied in this. And what is the most important thing to take from this? Is that the patient is in the center of this picture. Whether or not you in the audience believe it or not, you are a part of that doctor taking care of that patient. So I hope the gravity of what we're going to talk about today is really not lost on you, because it could be someone like that little girl we're going to talk about. Well, that was the bedside of many years ago. What does the bedside of today look like? The patient is still in the center. But you can see things are very, very different. In our desire to improve diagnosis, treat the afflicted, cure disease, we decided it was a great idea to digitize the treatment of patients and plug everything into a hospital onto the internet. Some of you out there in healthcare or in regulatory capacities around healthcare are familiar with this concept. This is called HIPAA. It was a piece of legislation passed, and it's federal law. And basically, it's one of the problems I deal with every single day. I'm not going to say today that we should not pay attention to HIPAA, which is simply let's protect patient health information, right? So HIPAA is a big hammer over healthcare that says if you leak patient health information, names, social security numbers, addresses, etc., then you'll get big fines. That legislation has led to a complete taking of the conversation about cybersecurity in healthcare. And what really ends up being is most of the time, cybersecurity is looked at as just rebranded PCI compliance, right? How can we follow the regulatory letter of the law, if you will, and make sure we don't leak information? But I will submit to you that our obsession with this data security at the expense of a comprehensive strategy of security is a losing proposition. And that what we risk as a society is not only a situation where we're leaking patient information every single day, that's not going to go away, but that we also may lose something far more precious, and that's life, human life. I would argue today that the storm is already here. Some say it's coming. And what I want to convince you in the next few slides is that we've had warnings about this for close to a decade, if not longer. And what have these warnings been? This is not an exhaustive list. This is some highlights. And if any of you in the room did research around this area and I did not mention you, please come and slap me on the wrist afterwards. I'm trying to kind of collect all of this, if you will. It's pretty vast. But in 2011, something notable happened. Jay Radcliffe, who he himself is a type 1 diabetic, also a brilliant security researcher, has a wireless insulin pump attached to his body at all times. It helps him deliver insulin at key times so that his blood sugar does not get too high or does not get too low. The insulin doesn't do the low part unless you give too much. And that's the problem. It's that this insulin pump has a reservoir of insulin, and it's supposed to give you a pre-designed dose based on what your blood sugar is. Well, the manufacturer, in an effort to make this more convenient for patients, more connected, decided to implement an insecure Bluetooth protocol, authentication protocol. And this own security researcher who has this pump attached to him turned his own security prowess onto his device, reverse engineered it, and found out that it was pretty trivial to cause the insulin pump to deliver the entire reservoir instantly. Not instantly, but over minutes. So a dose of insulin that you should be getting over a week to get in minutes, essentially killing a person. This is not science fiction. This is research that was presented at a large security conference. In 2012, we saw the evolution of what started with Barnaby Jack's work at hacking pacemakers and AICDs, that then, rest in peace Barnaby, kind of went to Billy Rios, who, these pacemakers, they do a lot of things. Most of the time they regulate how your heart is beating, but in rare circumstances, they have built-in shockers that can shock your heart back into a normal rhythm if it gets out of line. Well, after the protocols were reversed, there were some gaping security holes, and what was discovered was that it was also rather trivial to induce a wireless attack on a pacemaker AICD and cause an unintended shock that could be deadly in certain circumstances. I'm not going to mention much of the MedSec controversy that's happened in the last couple of years, but that's also part of this pacemaker AICD chronicle, something that's really kind of shaken the industry of medical device manufacturers. All right, so let's take it away from critical devices and let's get to critical infrastructure. Remember, we were mandated by the federal government and the Affordable Care Act to connect to one another, hospitals, to share information because it will decrease costs. Because of that push, security never really caught up. There was a Health and Human Services Task Force review that said that most hospitals lack even a single FTE for security. Now, large hospital networks that are more proactive it's maybe a different conversation. But you, I think, would be amazed out there of how little security talent we have at the front lines of healthcare. In 2014, Anonymous performed a pretty devastating denial of service attack on Boston Children's Hospital. Now, I won't get into the details of why they did that very much, other to say that this was not motivated by money, right? Many of you out there would say, why would anyone be ever so evil to hack a hospital? They must be wanting money or fame or prestige. And these motivations were different, or at least what was talked about was different. They did this for a political purpose. They thought that a patient in the hospital was being held against their will. And they thought that their large-scale denial of service attack, essentially crippling this hospital, would help free this person. They were attacked for about 5 days, and they eventually took themselves completely off the internet. This was pretty devastating to their ability to take care of patients. In 2015, we'll get back to devices, we had the Hospera hack. So Billy Rios, again, kind of one of the premier researchers in this space, bought one of these off of what I always tell people is eBay, but I'm actually not sure. And spent a year reversing it, did responsible disclosure, great, but found out that this brand and certain models of infusion pumps, which are devices at bedsides that control the rate of medication going into a patient's IV, okay? So we put a medicine in a bag, we can't give you the whole medicine at once, maybe that'll be too toxic, so we want to give you small doses over time. We have machines now that can deliver that medicine at certain rates. Well, because they wanted to make these things safer, they added drug libraries, but they recognized that they had to update these drug libraries, so they built in Wi-Fi. So what intentionally was a desire to help patients and make care safer, they had a technological solution that ended up making them tremendously vulnerable. This was a kind of a big shock. So what this particular piece of research showed was that it was also possible to deliver all the medicine very rapidly when maybe we wanted to give it to you over hours, to give you no medicine at all, and make it look like it's giving you some medicine. Pretty much complete control after the firmware was reversed. This caused the FDA for the first time in history, so the FDA regulates medical devices, it caused them for the first time in history to issue what is essentially, I call a soft recall. It said, don't use this device because it has cybersecurity concerns. That's pretty profound, actually, because their job is to make sure the dose is right when those pills go out and there's the actual stated amount of medicine in a pill. They've never really dealt with this, right? So for the first time in history, we have a medical device being warned to the world not to use because of security concerns. 2016, we get the first rash of ransomware attacks that have been hitting hospitals. I'm sure all of you out there have heard about this. I think it didn't start with Hollywood Presbyterian, but this was the kind of canary in the coal mine, if you will. This one got enough press to kind of get people worried about this. It just got lucky. Nothing fancy. It just got lucky. And devastated the hospital. They had to transfer patients. They were seriously considering transferring very sick patients out of their ICU to another hospital. The waiting room in the emergency department essentially tripled. And they couldn't do most day-to-day operations because we are so connected with these technological systems in the delivery of healthcare that we are incapable of delivering care without them. What you might not know, and what wasn't actually publicized quite a bit with this attack, is that there were 9 other hospitals that got hit with Lockheed within that same week. Almost all of them paid the ransom. And then let's take Hollywood Presbyterian and multiply it by 81. Now this says 16. This is an early report. The final report by the United Kingdom's National Health Service reported that 81 hospitals got hit with WannaCry. Now, let's talk about that. The National Health Service is a nationalized health organization delivery in the United Kingdom, right? 81 of their hospitals going down equates to about 31% of their ability to take care of patients in an entire country. So imagine if 31% of the hospitals in the entire United States were compromised and couldn't deliver the excellent care that you deserve, or that your brother deserves, or that your mom deserves, or that you deserve when you're having a stroke. Completely devastating. Really changed the conversation, There's been also some finger pointing by the National Health Service, the UK government, saying they think this is a nation-state attack originating from North Korea. That was intended for specifically attacking the Ukraine banking system, or a subset of players in the the Ukraine banking system, and this unintentionally spread to healthcare. I think that's a theme we're going to see often in the attacks on healthcare, is that people may not even be designing attacks to specifically do this. This may not be very sophisticated nation-state attacks, but the arsenals or just the random malware we see, it doesn't stop at the digital borders of hospitals, right? Your malware doesn't say, oh, I know this is patient care area, I'm just going to stop. It spreads indiscriminately. And the consequences aren't going to be some inconvenience or your grandmother's computer that won't boot up. It's going to be those patients in the ICU. Healthcare is fragile. And if you don't believe me, let me show you an example. I've showed you my favorite painting, maybe the only painting I know. This is my favorite New England Journal of Medicine paper. So it's a fancy schmancy journal in probably the best in the world for medicine. And this is a very interesting article. It just simply asks the question, raise your hand in the room if you've tried to get across town during a big marathon and it's just a pain in the ass. A lot of people. It asks the simple question, what if you have a heart attack or an out-of-hospital cardiac arrest at the same time a marathon's going on? What happens to you? So they looked at 11 cities with major marathons going on, and they tracked patients that had heart attacks or out-of-hospital cardiac arrest, and they followed up 30 days later, and they saw, what did they see? They saw that your time to get to a hospital by an ambulance was increased by 4.4 minutes. So it takes you longer to get to the hospital because of all those road closures, and that your chance of dying at 30 days was significantly higher just because of marathons going on. And although we don't have a study for the analogy of WannaCry, I hope that comes to light. I'm trying to get that and show that ransomware is essentially the same thing, that you're more likely to die in a hospital. Otherwise, that's under active attack, either by denial of service attack by Anonymous or Locky ransomware. Now, some of you in this room might be saying like, dude, I don't do anything close to healthcare. Why are you talking about all this stuff? Well, I'm going to submit to you that in your life, you will write code that contributes to healthcare in some way. That the lines of code that you write will be pivotal in taking care of a patient, and you might not even know it. Have you contributed to a library, an open source library that might be used in a software stack that's in healthcare? Do you work on cloud computing systems that healthcare uses to put all their EMR records on you wouldn't even know, right? There's so many ways that healthcare interacts with software that you might not even know that your code is helping take care of patients. I will say that software powers modern healthcare. It is as essential as antibiotics, x-rays, and surgery. Many new doctors, myself included, have never used paper charts. I don't know what a light box is. You know what a light box, like when you turn on the light, you put an x-ray up there? I've never used one of those. I wouldn't even know how to use one of those. I wouldn't know how to print out the film with the x-ray on it to put it on the light box, let alone find one. Many have never written on prescription pads. Now, I will confess, I wrote this about a month ago. I wrote my first handwritten prescription. I'm not a rare breed. That's just the facts of modern healthcare now. That's how connected we are. Without these technical systems, doctors today are helpless taking care of strokes, heart attacks, traumas in the 21st century. Whether you like it or not, your code better be secure. Because if not, could hurt somebody. We're going to talk about a hypothetical case. We're going to talk about Ann Nelson. She's a 68-year-old female. She has a past medical history of diabetes. She's got high blood pressure, and she's got a pacemaker. A story I hear every day working in the emergency department. She's found by her husband to have acute weakness of her face, left arm, and leg. These symptoms have been there, slowly getting worse for about 90 minutes. It's pretty clear to me, and I think most people out there, that she's probably having a stroke. We need to give her a medicine called TPA, or at least we should consider giving her a medicine called TPA. We don't have very many other interventions in stroke. TPA is pretty much the big one. We can only give it within a certain amount of time, because if we give it after it, the chance that it causes bleeding that may be deadly goes up. So the risk of giving this patient this medicine outweighs the benefit after about 4 hours. 3 to 4 hours, up to 6 in some situations, just for all the doctors in the room. She's already been having symptoms for 90 minutes. We only have 90 minutes to help her. Okay, we're going to talk about her journey from her home to when she gets this medicine, and I'm going to talk about all the systems. Think about yourself and where you contribute code, where you write code, and see if you interact with any part of this. She starts out at home. She has a pacemaker. It wirelessly connects on an unauthenticated protocol to a base station that looks like a router. It's a cool device. It's able to measure weird heart arrhythmias and send it to her cardiologist in real time, which is amazing. The problem is that the base station's running woefully antiquated, never patched version of embedded Linux that has, for some reason, default credentials you can just Google. She also has Fitbits, not to call it Fitbit particularly. She's got a bunch of health tracking devices that upload all of her health information to the cloud that she doesn't even understand. She now, Google and Amazon are announcing all these different pushes into healthcare. She has an iPhone. Her daughter gave it to her a couple years ago. She can FaceTime the kids. She also has this app now where she can download all of her health information and take it from place to place, but she doesn't really know what that means yet. Her husband has to call 911, right, to get the ambulance there. He picks up the phone, and many of you out there may not think about this, but that is a tremendously fragile system. You can review some of the work done at DEF CON 22 about it. But basically, these are antiquated, fragmented, underfunded systems of municipalities that are, I'm actually amazed, even work, that are tremendously vulnerable to telephone denial of service attacks. So any of you out there work in VoIP systems, you might not even think that your code works and supports critical 911 infrastructure. But she has to pick up he has to pick up the phone and call it, and hopefully it works. Well, the ambulance will arrive. The ambulance, another underfunded nightmare generally, they have to get her vital signs. Maybe they're going to get an electrocardiogram of her heart. They pick up this giant monitor. They put it on the patient gurney. They hook up all these wires like they're wiring her for stereo. That is poorly secured cellular connectivity that you can find these devices in practice with Shodan. You can just find random ambulance monitors connected cellularly on Shodan that are also running default credentials, no one's changed, that you can find in the manual when you Google it. When they get to the hospital, we talked a little bit about this. This hospital had a breach last year. They're in some remediation process. They're paying some big HIPAA fine. But they don't have a lot of budget to hire any IT staff, so they hire a bunch of consultants, and really there's truly no persistent security presence. Furthermore, the medical devices that connect to the internet in this hospital are all taken care of by bioengineers. And bioengineers says, IT, don't touch my devices. And the only security person for the whole hospital is on the IT side. And Biomed won't let them touch it because they're afraid they're going to break it. She's getting a little bit sicker now. She can't talk, at least nothing that's intelligible. The registration person runs up to the ambulance gurney that's wheeling into the hospital, and the husband will fork over all of her meaningful, identifiable information, her name, her current address, her social security number. That'll all get dumped into a database that, if we can believe some of the statistics out there, has a very high likelihood of being breached within the next 5 years. There's a breach a day in healthcare, they say. What she desperately needs at this time is a CT scan. Okay, I can't give her medicine to bust a clot in her brain that I think is there unless I'm sure it's not something else. Meaning, I can't give her the medicine for her stroke, that TPA, unless I get a CT scan, and that CT scan shows no blood in her head. She gets wheeled rapidly over to the CT scanner. It's running a custom build of Windows XP. It has never been patched because the company that has the CT scanner is afraid they will lose FDA approval for their device if they patch, which is not true. They can't afford testing to even do operating system upgrades, right? Because they're too busy developing the next generation of CT scanners. A couple years ago, the company had a little bit extra money in their security budget, so they paid an outside consultant to come in and just scan the network. When they did a very simple vulnerability scan, the CT scanner broke with just a Nessus scan. It just broke when you scanned it. It just went down. The hospital has invested in the CT scanner. It cannot be replaced for another 3 years. They just don't have it in the budget. These things have to last a long time. And that's another theme in healthcare you're going to find is that legacy systems are prevalent and a necessity. Once I get the CT scan, that image has to be stored in basically an image database. They're large files. The hospital can't support hosting that locally, so they upload it to the cloud. The radiologist that's going to read this image and tell me if there's blood in it isn't even in the same city as me. Because of teleradiology, they can read a CT scan 2,000 miles away. I hope the infrastructure that supports the connectivity for that radiologist to read that image, I hope it's intact. Once the radiologist lets me know there's no blood in that brain, I have to look up all those results and things on a computer. That's represented by the bottom left. I log into an electronic health record that basically the master control program for the entire care of delivery, the whole delivery of care. I hope it's working. I hope that it's available. I hope that all of the libraries and vendor conglomerates of Frankenstein systems upon systems that are built to support that workflow are working, because if I can't get those records, I don't know if I can access her allergies, what medicines she's on, and know whether or not I can give her that medicine, because her husband doesn't know, and she can't talk to me. Let's say all of it aligns and I'm able to figure that out, and I got to put in the order to give her this medicine. Well, I send an order through that electronic health record, and it goes to the pharmacist downstairs. The pharmacist looks at the order and says, that dose looks right. They send an approval back over the line, and then it gets sent to a networkly connected pharmacy container called a Pyxis. It's basically a giant cabinet that controls medications, can attribute what medications to what patients, bill them appropriately, etc. Now, there are physical overrides. So if this was owned, it wouldn't be like it would be locked. You could get a key, etc. But you got to think, it's kind of crazy. You can't even get meds normally out of a system unless it's plugged into the internet. Finally, we get this medicine, and we got to give it to her. We have 3 minutes left in the window, right? All of this has to align before I can even give her the medicine. She gets it in her arm, and then we roll the dice. We see if it even helps her. She may be unlucky and get one of those catastrophic side effects that we hope we don't get. It may bust the clot. She may walk again. She may talk again. She may have some very meaningful recovery. I hope you understand now how connected healthcare is, and how it isn't, if you don't work for a hospital or work for a health startup or do software specifically in this sphere, that you can see all the other parts of this that you may have a hand in, and recognize that a failure at almost any one of these points would have pushed her outside of that window, and she wouldn't have been able to get that medicine that she desperately needed. That is modern healthcare. So how are we going to fix this, right? So like you're all depressed out there. You know, if you start antidepressants today, it take about 3 weeks to work, okay? So you just hang in there, all right? How are we going to fix this? Because it's a hard problem. You can see how many people are involved in this, how many processes, etc. Well, I'm going to give some kind of broad recommendations, but one of the biggest ones I'm going to say is we need to bring new team members to the table, all right? It's cliche. I know it's oversaid. Truly, we work in silos. And we're only concerned with what I write, what I do. I've heard a lot today about developers versus the security teams, et cetera, and kind of bridging those silos. It's an operational problem in every industry. But sometimes it's money at stake in other industries. Sometimes it's market share, whatever. In healthcare, it's people. It's meaningful to break down those walls, if you will, and it's necessary. So what I'm going to say is I'm going to show you an example of one of the best teams I've ever seen. And I think we should take a page out of their book.
We have an 18-year-old that was the unrestrained passenger involved in a high-speed motor vehicle collision. The driver was killed at the scene. This patient was unresponsive at the scene, has now been intubated, and there's been reports of hypotension. And Life Flight's bringing the patient in. Any questions?
So this is a simulation. This is not a real patient. So don't worry out there. There's no real blood. The person that's you're about to see is natural.
Team on.
This patient's intubated with an 8.02. There's good breath sounds. Pulse ox is 100%. Bring the bit down just a little bit.
Confirm color change, please. All right, we have good color change.
All right. Hook them up to our monitors. Let's carefully move them over. Take them off the bag as we move them over.
Equal bilateral breath
Do you see how every person
Ready, guys?
in that
1,
room
2, 3.
knows exactly what they're doing? They do things without even talking to each other because they're so in sync, and they're communicating.
Okay, let's get initial vital signs, please.
There's still equal breath sounds. Bilateral femoral pulses.
Dr. McGowan on line 4 with the CCC, please. Dr. McGowan on line 4.
Notice that every one of these team members has a pre-designated specific role. The respiratory therapist is helping this patient breathe. The nurse is putting in IVs and giving critically important medications. The doctor is helping direct the flow of diagnosis and treatment decisions. The technicians are helping getting this patient on the monitor. This is, in my opinion, one of the perfect examples of the pinnacle of teamwork. This was not easy. This requires years of training, cross-disciplinary communication and conversation with a common goal in mind. What we do, and the patient's fine at the end, they're an actor. I should have waited till the end to say that, huh? What we have in healthcare IT there's no common goal. There's no awareness of what's at stake. We lack expertise of the diversity required of expertise in every single silo of medicine. And then we're satisfied with the poor outcomes. It's a perfect storm for things never to change. But I think we can, and I think I'm far more receptive talking to you. You're far more receptive to this message than a lot of medicine is, and it's going to be your work in educating healthcare about these vulnerabilities that's going to really push the scale in our favor. I truly believe that. If I go in front of a room of this many doctors, they throw stuff at me because they're used to the old, right? They don't understand the new. They don't understand how reliant we are. I'm going to plug, this is not vendor stuff. This is a non-profit grassroots organization called I Am the Cavalry, okay? All it is a bunch of hackers that volunteer their time to educate these individual silos about what's at stake, what's important, all right? So if you're a security researcher and you're doing research in this area, help us educate policymakers in Washington that can pull the regulatory strings to get hospitals and device manufacturers to do the right thing. Volunteer your time. It's anywhere in the space where human life or public safety comes into interaction with what you guys do every day, which is write code, right? So cars, healthcare, critical infrastructure. Donate your time, if you will. It's a really amazing organization. And one of the things that they did, and this is, I know, a text-heavy slide, I'm sorry, is parallel something called the Hippocratic Oath, but they did it for connected medical devices. Many of you out there are probably aware there was this old Greek doctor named Hippocrates. It came out with an oath that doctors are supposed to take. In actuality, no one really takes that oath, or very few doctors nowadays that train take that oath. It sounds a lot fancier than it really is. It had some really weird stuff in it too. Like, can you imagine a Greek doctor like writing an oath and it being applicable today? So long story short is, it's a great analogy for what we should be doing in healthcare. So I Am the Cavalry wrote this, and I'm not going to read all of this, But basically imagine it like you taking an oath, right? You now realize what's at stake. You know, you're going to pledge yourself to do something bigger than just in your silo write your code. I'm not involved in this. Someone else is responsible for that, not me. And this is what kind of the bigger things, right? So they said cyber safety by design is one of the principles of this. So I'm just going to read it out to you. I respect domain expertise from those that came before me. I will inform, design with security lifecycle, adversarial resilience, and secure supply chain practices. Third-party collaboration. I acknowledge that vulnerabilities will persist despite best efforts. I will invite disclosure of potential safety or security issues, report them in good faith. Evidence capture, one of the things that I personally am very passionate about out there. If you're building these, build an evidence capture. Okay, I can't convince doctors that this is a problem because they want a body count. They want me to point to an example of someone that's been killed by WannaCry. We just don't have the surveillance or the telemetry to do that. These medical devices don't log anything. So how can I tell you if it's been infected by malware and resulted in a patient's death if I never know, no one at the scene of the incident even is thinking about malware, right? They're not, it's not even on their, it's not even in their mind at all that this could be the case. Next, bioengineering has no security expertise. They're not talking with IT, and that's where security is. Next, that even if they ship it to the vendor to fix it because it's acting weird, the vendor has no incentive to do a deep forensic analysis on that device and find the malware that infected it, because if they do, they have to report it to the FDA. Right? So we have a perfect storm to never find these things impacting patient care. Evidence capture. I foresee unexpected outcomes. I will facilitate evidence capture, preservation, and analysis to learn in safety investigations. Resilience and containment. I recognize failures in components and the environment are inevitable. I will safeguard critical elements of care delivery in adverse conditions and maintain a safe state with clear indicators of failure. Cyber safety updates. I understand that cybersecurity will always change. I will support prompt, agile, and secure updates. If that sounds like something you can get behind, check it out. Go to IamTheCavalry.org. Read the Hippocratic Oath. There's a lot more there for connected medical devices, and recognize that, you know, it's an analogy for a lot of different industries as well if you're working on autonomous driving cars, any other critical infrastructure. And recognize that this is something that you can kind of pledge yourself to, if you will. It's Pledge Week. All right. I was never in a fraternity. They would never take me. If there's a ping pong fraternity, would have gotten in that one for sure. All right, we're going to go back to the first important slide of my presentation, which was this painting. I hope you understand now and recognize and look upon this painting with a different light, recognizing that in some way you are the doctor looking over that patient. You may not want to, you may not be happy to, but just because of where we are today and software powering modern healthcare, code could save a life. Thank you very much. Do you have any questions for me? Oh, we're going to get a mic up to you. So anyone with questions, you can just yell profanity at me until they get a mic to you, and then don't. Yes, sir.
Thank you very much for a very informative talk. I guess we saved the best for last today. About a couple of years ago, I saw some studies that showed healthcare data are among the least secure databases in the nation. And I know that on the dark web, you know, they have markets, they exchange, they trade, like eBay. And healthcare data are the most valuable data as they're priced on the dark web. In fact, they're like 20 times more valuable than financial data. So it looks like there is a Goldilocks between lack or non-existent security and then potential for monetizing that. So I talked to I went to go to a few university events that are like healthcare events and talked to some of the faculty members and researchers. that this is the main issue, a major issue. Are you willing to partner people from other industries? And I detected that they were not very receptive. They're saying, we can handle it better, basically was their impression. So it's good to see that somebody from healthcare industry, in fact, a medical doctor, has this dual background. So there's a major problem. How could we help in terms of bridging the gap? And clearly this is a good opportunity for partnering from people from other industry to tackle it.
Great insights, and I completely agree. Healthcare has an access issue, right? A lot of you out there would be completely shocked at what my credentials into the electronic health record give me access to. Like, it would keep you up at night. But it's a hard problem because when I'm in the emergency department and at any time, 24/7, 365, a patient could come in and I need to access their record within minutes, not hours. And I need to access all of their information, not subsets of their information, right? We have an access problem. And it's not just 5 people need to know that. Nurses, pharmacists, techs, respiratory therapists, they all need to be able to access most of that information. So we have a hard problem. We can't really restrict a lot of the access with our credentials. Now, we can try to mitigate that in a variety of ways, and we're trying to. But you're right. These breaches are, because of a lot of these reasons with access, how interconnected we're required to be. Like, I have to be able to share information with another hospital system instantly. I'm mandated by law, or at least heavily suggested to, which is, it's a stick, it's not a carrot, right? So all these hospitals talk to each other. We have to do that. Everyone has a credential that has the access to everything in the database. These are hard problems. And because of that, we get breaches all the time. Like I said, there's about a breach a day. The dark web comment, I don't know how true that is. I've heard the same things. And a health record goes for between 50 cents and $7 on the dark web. Like, maybe I should go shopping to really figure it out. I will probably do that, actually. But you're right. It's very rich and valuable data because it's not a credit card that's been reported. It's good for maybe 6 hours, right? It's not a credit card number, POC stuff. It's our PCI stuff. It's your name, your address, answers to perhaps a lot of your security questions. It's a pretty rich data set. So maybe that's why it's so reported to be so expensive. And then the last thing, which is just collaboration. It is changing. Doctors are generally in control of a lot of this, if you will, but not all of them. There's a lot of C-suite that doesn't have any medical background that are averse to these types of relationships, collaborative research type of things. Healthcare thinks, especially physicians, they think they know everything, and that's just not true, right? They're arrogant for the most part. They think they can handle it, even though they don't know what the hell they're talking about. That's why it's people like you out there that have to educate them. And it's a conversation, and it's going to take a while. But what I think you'll see is a generational component to this, right? So another cited statistic is that 40% of doctors by 2022 will be millennials, or Generation X or Y, or whatever that one before it is, right? So we're going to have a generational switch. They grew up with MySpace and Facebook and getting hacked, right? They are adverse to it. They know it. The generation thing will change, and the old stuffy doctors who don't care about security or think it's an issue, they're going to go away, and we'll get a new bunch of them out there that hopefully will do exactly what you're saying, is partner with security researchers. If you come to us in good faith with a device vulnerability, let's work together to solve it, right, and fix it. I think healthcare will be more receptive. It's going to take more time.
What about 100% oxygen for stroke patients, specifically hyperbaric oxygen, or there was a paper a few years ago from UCLA where they actually reversed blood flow to try to get oxygen to the other side of a clot?
Yeah, so stroke care is evolving. TPA is not a perfect drug. It's far from a perfect drug. We look all the time in medical research about different ways we can treat stroke. I use stroke as an example of a time-dependent condition with pretty much one widely accepted treatment that could be affected by what we're talking about. But I'm glad to report, and you have identified as well, this may not be the case in a few years. We may have stroke care that's far more robust, and it won't be so time-dependent. Oh, and hyperbarics, you were saying?
Usually connected to the internet. Hyperbaric chambers are usually not. They're still old-fashioned with valves and big wheels.
Absolutely. Yes, right here.
The only time I ever had an opportunity to do a penetration test on a hospital network was kind of before the days of IoT. But I do remember that even back then, they told us basically everything's in scope except for these IP addresses. You're not allowed to send even one packet to them. So this got me wondering, now that there's so many more devices and systems and all this, for any given device, like let's say that drug cabinet thing, or maybe one of these pumps or something, through the life cycle of that device from when it gets purchased and to when it gets retired because it's broken or something, does that thing ever get any kind of scrutiny? Is it standard practice to avoid IoT that, that's live on patients, even though it's connected?
I think I have bad news for you. There are like a couple hospital networks in the entire country that are doing very cool things, like actually doing vulnerability scans on any device that hits their network, any medical device that hits their network before it goes into production, actually before they even buy it. And that's Mayo, right? Mayo has tons of money. They can strong arm device manufacturers to say, we're not going to buy your product unless you let us do a full vulnerability assessment and go through this whole process of making sure it's something we want to plug into our network. But that is the exception. And there are very few other healthcare organizations that even do security assessments. Let me back up. You'd be amazed how many hospital, or maybe not, you'd be amazed how many hospital networks or hospital systems don't even know what's on their network. They don't have a full inventory of the devices, let alone what IP is what. Right? That's like the most basic of network hygiene, right? These are flat, unsegmented networks behind the firewall that are completely open text, pipe delimited HL7. You can man in the middle on these networks like the good old days. Remember the good old days? You could like really man in the middle easily? Not anymore, or maybe, but.
Yeah, I've been in the healthcare space for several years trying to secure systems, and the medical device problem is really a pain, but they're coming around. Just to share a little bit of a personal experience, we were told by the salespeople for the medical device, oh no, you can't, we won't get FDA approval, we'll have to, we can't guarantee. And then I said, let me speak to your tech guys and your IT guys. And after discussions with them, oh yeah, we can patch the systems. Oh really, you can? Yeah, why not? So if you dig deep enough, you'll find there's a lot of baloney on the surface of people who really don't understand. And then, in a few other cases, we just pushed back and said, you're not going to be on our network if this is not going to be a patch system, right? Of course, there's compensations, compensatory controls that we put in place, writing firewall rules. The system can only talk to this other system, for example. But, there's a lot of things that you can do to help mitigate the risk, but ultimately, you got to push back, and they're coming around. And one other fact real quick, you scared us with those slides. Should we cancel the drinks for tonight?
No, we need to drink more. Just real quick on that, I agree. And whether or not device manufacturers want to or not, or as proactive as that, they're going to have to. The FDA has released two guidelines that aren't actually guidelines straight from their mouth. These are going to be requirements for new device approval. Is the pre-market guidance and the post-market guidance. Pre-market guidance is new devices that are coming to market, you better jump through these hoops. And also build a robust security posture. And they actually give recommendations, right? And then the post-market, for the stuff that's already out there, this is what we recommend you do, these mitigating controls, if you will. The FDA has on record said that although the document says guidelines, they will withhold device clearance, approval through the FDA unless you meet these benchmarks. So it's hard because device manufacturers think the FDA doesn't have any teeth. The FDA is pushing back, saying it's going to end up being kind of bloody. But the underlying thing is that device manufacturers know they can't ignore it anymore. Because the other thing that's scary about this is that when we find that patient, I think it's already happened. But when we find that patient that I can prove to you died because of a compromised medical device, who knows what's going to happen? The lawsuits, the class action status, who's responsible, the healthcare delivery organization, the device manufacturer who never patched it. No one knows what's going to happen. And it's going to be on the cover of the New York Times, right? I mean, that's a big deal when that happens. So they don't want to be the device that gets owned and have they be the poster child for this. So They recognize that as well. It's a little bit slower. We're making a lot of progress. I don't mean to demonize them. Some device manufacturers are way ahead, and they're leading the industry, and they're doing some really cool stuff in a relatively hard space to secure. All right, that was me. Please don't be depressed. Go enjoy a drink. Have fun.